Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show, heard daily on Bible School Radio 91.3 KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, how the mortgage process looks when you decide to build. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, how does the mortgage process look like when you decide to build? Well, today Mark Pfeiffer is here to give us some information, talk a little bit about the mortgage rates and what's going on. Mark, how are you doing?
Buddy, I'm okay. Been better, but I'm doing okay.
I wonder what your days are like because, you know, I was, and this, we haven't talked about doing this, but I want to have a philosophical discussion with you.
I'm game.
Because I read this article on Market Watch, and it really made me think. We talk about what's going on with the real estate markets, and it comes down to supply and demand. And I really got to thinking about that because there's not a real good solution for this. I mean, either the supply has got, and it's more likely that this will happen, I think. I mean, your opinion, more likely the supply or the number of people wanting to sell their houses are going to reluctantly cut their price back down to sell their house because there's a demand for it, but it's not affordable. Where does this get corrected, or maybe does it get corrected?
Well, I'll read the last chapter of the book, so we can sit here and talk about it, but I'll end it with this. I have no clue how to fix it in the immediate future. But right. You're 100% correct because there is supply and demand, economics 101. I didn't do so hot in high school in economics, but the reality is I got a B, but I did supply and demand, right? If you have a lot of people that need housing and you only have less than, let's call it 1 million homes for sale, and of that million, by the way, 200,000-ish are new construction, like not inhabitable. So when you have more than 1 million people trying to buy a home and there's less than 1 million homes, it's going to keep housing prices stable. And then throw on the fact that you got people sitting in their homes right now with 3% interest rates, 3, 4%. And today's rates are going to be in the 7s. Those folks aren't going to sell.
No, so you're exactly right.
It's truly a problem because even if they wanted to sell, then the question is where do they go? They got to pay more. Today's rates, they may be not just lateral move, it may be a downgrade. So, not to make light of it, but what a pickle, right? Because the home builders, think about this, and I know we're going to talk more about that, but home builders last year, the first 6 months of the year, things were great. I'll speak as an industry whole as well as the Mortgage Mark team. Like we were hitting our goals. January through June, things were great. We were hitting what we forecasted. Everything was fine. All of a sudden, around July, August, things just the switch got flipped, and suddenly the market went quiet.
Right.
And builders, August, September, October, they stopped building homes because why would they put something on the ground if they don't know what the future looks like? And it was pretty much that way for the next 6 months. Which, by the way, now that the market picked up a little bit again in this first part of this year, they don't have they're about to have the same shortage because they didn't start the homes 9 and 12 months ago. So now there's a demand. The demand's back, and they don't have the homes to sell. So it's going to take builders call it, and I'm making this up, but my projection could be 3 to 5 years before they can put enough inventory on the ground to meet the demand. Because every single day in this country, it's weird, but people keep getting older, which means these millennials are becoming of age to buy homes, and that's a huge percentage of the population. So from a supply and demand, I just don't see how there's a quick fix to this, and the builders just got to be able to put something. And then the next question is, how do you make it affordable?
So let's talk. let's throw this this in the mix as well. Okay, so we can look at this from so many different angles. Obviously, let's look at it. Let's go back to the builders. Is it safe to say that if you look at all your builders that are out there today that are out there trying to fix the supply problem, that there's going to be a portion of those builders, hope not, but there's going to be a portion of those builders, maybe a good portion, that don't have the staying power to stay in business?
I understand, and I think that is true, but the reality is I think the builders, especially the ones that have been around for that 07, 08 time period, right? The ones that still have, the battle scars from the mortgage meltdown, and the ones, and a lot of the builders I know, and I'll speak just to the ones I know, you got veterans running these companies. I mean, they're 40 years in the industry. And so those guys have had dry powder, have access to money, so that if and when a small builder goes down or somebody doesn't have the staying power for this kind of market, I have a feeling those lots, those builds, or whatever, they'll get absorbed by these builders. In other words, I don't think it's going to be this fire sale, which then reduces prices. It's just going to be somebody goes in and buys those lots, maybe at a discount, and they win a little bit, but it still doesn't fix the housing shortage. If those builders go down, then there's only so much risk that one builder's able and willing to take. Right. So you need the competition to build in certain areas, because some builders may say, "Hey, this is my market," and that little guy out there in Mineral Wells or somewhere far out of the metroplex, some of the builders may not go out that far. So you need them. But yes, there's a possibility some of these builders may not be able to sustain what's here if this is truly now the new norm, which I don't think it is. But if this does stay, then you may have some folks that can't weather this storm. You're right.
I guess it comes down to, and obviously, hopefully, none of this happens, but something that kicks the real estate markets back into just this no actions happening. And
you know what I think is going to happen? And this is Mark Pfeiffer, and I don't know what disclaimers we need to sit there and scroll across the radio and, the fine print, whatever it is. And this is Mark Pfeiffer's just speculation. And I've been saying this for a while. During COVID, even during, round two, whatever you want to call it, where the people are going back to the world, there were a ton of phone calls for people calling to get Airbnb, to buy homes for investment properties. And while the underwriting guidelines, so I'm not going to blame the mortgage world. In 07, 08, that was our fault. That was the industry's fault, right? This one, people were figuring out ways to come up with the 20% down payment. They did have to have good credit. So I'm not faulting that if they were bad loans. I'm just saying it was amazing the number of people. I had people call me who didn't even own homes who wanted to buy Airbnb investment properties. And so to me, just having a conversation with somebody today, now that credit card debt at an all-time high, now that some of the people are losing their jobs, are getting hours cut, you may have the American consumer suddenly get under a financial strain and duress. And even if it's an Airbnb, they may not be taking that Airbnb vacation. So then the question is, does that homeowner have the ability to carry two mortgages at once with no rent? And there's a lot of, and I don't know if the number's big enough. I've not done enough homework, but I can absolutely see where there could be some new inventory available for individual, investors that own 1, 2, or 3 homes. They don't own 40 or 50. Where 1 or 2 of those things don't happen and don't go right, suddenly they got a problem they got to sell. So I can see how a little bit of this inventory may get released over time if there is financial strain anywhere, because they've made money. They bought a house last year or two. The equity's still there. So I could see at least more homes becoming available for sale for the folks that just want out of the investor game. And I personally have done it. And unless you have a bunch, I don't think owning 1 or 2 investment properties, just owning 1 or 2, that's not a critical mass for me to put up with the headache. So I can foresee that coming through, and maybe that helps provide a little, maybe that releases some of the pressure under the housing market. I don't know. That may not be big enough, inventory to move it.
So let's talk a little bit let's go back to supply for just a second. And obviously we always just focus on what's going on here. There's just not enough inventory to satisfy the demand that's out there. We've established that. What happened to supply that got it to this point? So
it's interesting, believe it or not, and I did this, so forgive me, my facts may not be correct. So if you're listening and you want to light me up on social, feel free. But the reality is my disclaimer is I don't remember it exactly. But believe it or not, Bob, and you might, and I could probably Google it real quick, like Roe v. Wade, the Abortion Act from 35 years ago, 40 years ago, somewhere in that range, 35-ish years ago. Like, believe it or not, if you look at the population chart, I think people, builders, industry, just weren't paying attention because all of a sudden Roe v. Wade didn't happen and the birth ratios suddenly shot up. Well, those folks are finally now coming of age. And so it's just, and people are living longer too, by the way. So you got more, and then immigration. So just more people come in the country. More people are being, these millennials are now of the age of buying. You got people living longer. And so people, the boomer generation now has enough money where maybe in the past, like it wasn't uncommon for like my parents to have, my grandmother lived with us growing up. Well, now the boomers don't want to live with their kids. So I just think you have all this thing to where this nobody was paying attention for this supply, or pardon me, the demand was growing and growing and growing. It was just at such a slow pace, and suddenly it's here. And so that's my take on this. But if you go look at it, like the number of millennials that are out there is just this big spike, and it all started happening, around that same time period. Roe v. Wade changes, and all of a sudden there's a lot more births in America, immigration, people buying, 1 or 2 homes. People with wealth now buy 2 or 3 homes because they want to. So it's just I don't know. That's my answer, whether it's right or wrong. I think that's up, feel free to give your own opinion if you got one out there, but I think that's what happened.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the answer, 2 to 3 years ago was all these corporations are moving into our area, which is true. But the problem is much bigger than that. And I think I think that people are waking up to the fact that, this is a complex situation here that's developing. And, you talked about that last chapter. I would love to get an advanced copy of that book and just see what does happen. Because
again, the last chapter of my book is to be continued version, because I don't know what it is. This is my book is not complete. I don't know how to solve this, because then the other one's affordability. So I saw something, and let me see if I can, I think it's up on one of my screens. Here it is. Median home price for new home sales. So new construction. This is nationwide. I saw this today, and so I saved it for this. $436,700. So $440,000 for a median price. Now it's not an average. So understand there's a difference, right? Because median just says if 5 homes sold, it's that third one, the one that's in the middle, not the high, not the low. But still, the average price point home, if I'm not mistaken, still over 400. Man, I bought my first home, and I understand 20 years ago, and it's like your grandpa saying they bought a Coke for a nickel. But at the end of the day, that's a boatload of money for an average price home for somebody to get in the housing market. So then the question is, how do you make affordable homes to where a family with dual income, that makes $80,000-$90,000, which is a normal good living. It's like, how do you create affordability, and especially with rates where they are today. So I did see something over the last 2 days, coincidentally. Builders are now trying to build homes. I know one here semi-local, I say semi-local, but they're greater North Texas. They're building homes for 599 square feet total.
Say that again, 599.
599, so under 600, and I don't know what it is. Something about zoning or something. But they're making a community of homes for sale that are under 600 square feet. That's a kitchen and maybe a bedroom that doubles as that's an apartment. That's smaller than an apartment.
That's a New York apartment.
So that's a New York apartment in Texas, and that's here in North Texas. But they're doing it from an affordability standpoint. You can at least own some, because the joke is, right, how much, people are griping about the interest rate being, 7% or whatever they're going to be. Well, the interest rate on rent is 100%, right? Because you're paying equity, whether it's equity you get to keep or your landlord's equity. You're paying equity to something when you pay rent. So the whole point is, is it worth it? I don't know. If you got a family of 4, no. If you're a young individual or somebody who's a single, or maybe just a couple, then maybe you can make that work. But yet, I think the answer is the industry is going smaller. They're cutting out dining rooms. They're cutting out formal living rooms. And they're trying to build homes now for 1,400 square feet to where a normal family can live in there. But it's just, to keep the prices down, you're now getting $300,000, $250,000, but man, you're giving up a lot of space for it.
Well, this is this is a reach, okay, a big reach, and I'm walking a dangerous tightrope because I haven't researched this before talking about it on the radio. But it seems like other countries have already gone through maybe what we're about to go through, as far as population goes, limited supply of homes, big skyscrapers everywhere, full of apartments, real small apartments. What do you think that there's countries like China that are telling us this is where we're going?
Here, I don't know. And here's what my first thing that came to mind. And again, like you, we're just both shooting from the hip, and maybe you and I should rehearse these things before we just say them over the radio. But the reality is this. I forget that I was talking to somebody about something, and it kind of saw how a moment where I was negotiating something or asking somebody to do something. I thought in my head I had all these options and all this stuff to do. Turns out I just didn't. I only could do this one thing. And I remember getting grumpy. And I remember thinking, man, I was grumpy. And why was I grumpy? And it was because I had this illusion of choice. I thought I had choices to make, but instead I just got this. So the reason why I say that and how this compares to what you just described, let's take, I don't know, I've been to Europe, once or twice, and so I've been to cities like New York. They don't have a choice, Bob. They have to do New York studio apartments at this site because they're landlocked. I think the difference here in Texas, people have choices, whether they do actually have choices or financially.
Yeah,
they may
that's
not
a
have
good point.
choice.
That's a good point.
But it's like that we could go. I mean, I drove up north of the Metroplex to Whitesboro this weekend. I don't think I've been up there in many years. Holy smokes, it's beautiful up there in North Texas with trees and some gradual hills. I was like, man, and it just reminds you how big, not just North Texas, but Texas. I'm like, holy smokes, we can build forever. And so I think the problem, the frustrations we feel here versus San Francisco, anybody from California, man, they're happy to get what they get when they come here. It's just because we've been spoiled for our entire existence here in Fort Worth, Dallas, Fort Worth, where suddenly just like, I could go get a 4,000 square foot house, but now I'm settling for a 2,000. Again, that 4,000 is never a choice from a financial perspective. So I think it's just a mental shift, but you're right. They've already gone through it, but I think they were forced into it. So it's easier to just succumb and accept it versus here you want to fight it and say, this is ridiculous. So I don't know if that answered anything, but I couldn't agree more. They've already gone through it. We just got to figure out how to do it and not lose our sanity.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I can't think of another topic that has the dynamics, the layers, the toxicity, it goes on and on and on, as real estate does. And especially in just reading some of the articles that, it seems like time just flies by. What were we doing a year ago? And things started to become at a stalemate, or was it 2 years ago? Can't even remember now. But let's talk a little bit. I want to give out your web address as well, mortgagemark.com, if you want any information about Mark. How are rates holding up right now? Because I know that they've obviously gone up quite a bit with the interest rates have gone up in the markets. So what are we looking at right now?
Yeah, and that's with the top of the show. Yes, how I'm doing. I said I'm just doing okay, or whatever my little joke was, and it's because rates these last 3 or 4 weeks have just gotten just beat up. We're today actually making a nice little rally. Happy to see that, but for the most part, for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, they've just been going up. So they're now in that low 7 to mid 7 range. We've even had some, depending on credit, could be in the 7s or 8s, which is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So having said that, and I've been saying it, you can go back and listen to all your old shows, and you can look at all the weekly updates I give my clients and referral partners. And you guys go to mortgagemark.com. Like I said, you'll see the blog. So I've been saying this, and I still think it's true. Rates will be going lower in the next 6 to 12 months. I did not foresee the little spike in February when they went back to 7s. I didn't see this one. And obviously I can't predict the future, so there's that disclaimer too. But the reality is they're going up. I think over the next 2 or 3 months, inflation is coming down. I hope the Fed's going to be patient enough. We'll see tomorrow or Friday. They're in Jackson Hole right now. With something they say, maybe they ease up a little bit. But it's just the Fed's using data from like old data to make decisions today. I don't think they're using the current real time, and I wish they would. But a lot of that's just spooking the markets. The reason for the rally today is some of the job reports numbers for the previous reported. Turns out the job market's not as strong as they thought.
Oh, shocker.
Again. So,
shocker.
I know, right? They've changed it. Literally, like January, they changed the way they do it. So it's like not even real data today compared to what it was last time. So all this goes to say, rates aren't great. And I need to say this because I feel like I'm going to get off, and if any of my cohorts are listening, like, what are you doing? You're crucifying the real estate market. Guys, it is, like you said, Bob, this is a hot topic, whether it's toxicity or passion, whatever you want to call it. But home ownership, yes, it's expensive to buy a home. What I'm saying is it's going to keep getting more expensive. Therefore, is this a good time to buy? Rates do suck. And I don't know if I'm allowed to use that word, and it doesn't sound professional.
I prefer that
they're
you
not
didn't.
great. They're not great, right? So let's just use they're not great. But guess what? They're not forever. You can get a mortgage today, and you can refinance when rates go down. So homeownership is going to keep getting more and more expensive. If you're in the market, and this is the nice part, people still get married, people still have kids, people move for jobs. Like, it is a good time to buy. So I don't want somebody thinking, oh, I'm out of the market, this is me, and I'm not doing it. Look, plan for it. Even if it's not in the next 12, 24 months, homeownership, the average homeowner has a net worth that is 40x greater than your average renter. And I prove it. I got an employee who's in her mid-20s. They bought a house 2.5 years ago during COVID, and these young 20s now have over $100,000 of equity in their home. They bought McKinney. So it's like, holy smokes, all they did was live there. They didn't have to go invest. There's no risk. They're going to pay rent or pay a mortgage. So again, homeownership is still great. My only complaint is I want it to be available to everyone, and it's hard to do that as prices keep going up because at some point people get priced out and they don't have that choice. So the building, we need builders to keep building more. The problem is when the market goes tough like this, they shut down. They're going to be scared to put inventory on the ground, not knowing if the rates stay at 8, maybe the market does shrink. They can't be sitting there carrying all that cost. So it's this weird, we need them to build more, but there's so much risk and so much front-end capital needed to build. It just makes it tough for them to go chips all in.
Let me ask you this real quick, and we've got about a minute and a half left. The builders, and they start to build a house, obviously, the prices still going up on building materials? Do they have that locked in?
The good news is no. I mean, at this point, what's funny is, the prices are still going up just because cost of land and all that other stuff. But for the most part, the commodities have come down, they've settled down. I'm not saying they got back to normal, but they're not as goofy as they once were. Where, during COVID, it was like it seemed like prices changed almost weekly. So no, we haven't seen those wild swings in the last, call it 12 months. That is the one plus of these higher rates. It's slowed things down from a consumption standpoint to where they can, the materials are able to get caught up, and we don't see those wild swings so much anymore.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. If you want more information on Mark, go to mortgagemark.com and check out the website. Mark, always good to have you on the program. See you next month.
Great being here, Mr. Brooks. Have a good day.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. It's really interesting. I don't know what it was, but I was reading Market Watch, which is a very good resource for information, and they were really talking about the statistics, and I just dawned on me. And like I said, usually we talk ahead of time about what we're gonna do on the radio program. I didn't tell him that I was going to do this, that we're going to get into this philosophical discussion. It just is really interesting because there's just so many dynamics that and a lot of things that are unprecedented. So it will be interesting to see how this last chapter, as we were talking about, plays itself out, and how the market, the mortgage rates and real estate markets work from here going forward. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.